Cottage property. The field of cottage sales is an exciting, demanding, and increasingly complicated facet of real estate sales. Originally, the concept of rural sales, including cottage, was viewed as a basic extension of the urban residential market. In recent years, logistics in rural marketplace have needed to acquire specialized knowledge to deal with the unique issues faced by cottage buyers and sellers. Again, as part of this chapter 4 cottage properties, we're going to identify significant construction issues involving cottages, with particular reference to structural movements, sagging roof, decks, porches, drainage, and winterization. We'll also discuss key considerations involved in water wells and sewage systems, including appropriate clause drafting. We'll identify key approval procedures and related requirements concerning the installation of boathouses and docks, including appropriate clause drafting. We'll outline regulatory provisions concerning dredging and aquatic plant control. We'll explain key issues regarding cottage access from the perspective of both public roads and private deeded or undeeded access. We'll outline typical zoning provisions that relate to waterfront cottages as distinct from requirements for other residential use. We'll identify and discuss important limitations that may be encountered when trying to obtain hydro or telephone service in a residential area. We'll discuss the municipal services that may or may not be available to recreational properties, and we'll review the cottage and recreational property checklist. So coming to the cottage and recreation market, the term cottage conjures up the idea of idyllic Muskoka or Halliburton waterfront retreat, but various type of properties fulfill the same urge to escape the urban commotion and seek solitude, whether by the lake or simply on a remote lot. The recreational market contains many alternatives, the most notable of which are seasonal cottage, winterized or year-round cottage homes, country homes, chattels, and hobby farms. Seasonal cottages is the largest category of recreational property. Involves non-winterized structures used during the summer months, although increasingly year-round use is favored given escalating prices and increasing service facilities offered to rural recreation homes. In many cases, however, terrain, water access, only uncleared road access during the winters and snow ice conditions make such winterization unrealistic or impossible. The most expensive and popular cottages are those that border a river or a lake. This expanding category involves a greater investment. Essentially, the winterized or year-round cottage homes uh, involves a greater investment, with buyers often investing huge funds in expanding, renovating, or building a permanent home for either full or part-time use. The typical scenario involves a couple with children who convert a cottage into a winterized home for seasonal use, with the ultimate plan to retire or move there permanently. Country homes. At one time, affluent city dwellers enjoyed the benefit of a fully furnished country home, but the trend now encompasses many middle-income families seeking solitude of an off-water acreage beyond the hustle and bustle of urban life. Chattels, these are fully equipped cottages, typically purchased for winter sports use. Hobby farms. Hobby farms are originally purchased to further a personal hobby, such as training animal or growing a limited variety of crops. The stereotype type purchaser was typically a full-time professional seeking the exercise and enjoyment of pursuing a small enterprise. In recent years, hobby farms are often simply country homes and are simply country homes in disguise. When purchased with the intent of an enterprise, many become simply a second home away from the urban congestion. Construction. The listing and sale of cottage property necessitates specialized knowledge regarding construction issues, not frequently encountered in most urban markets. Essentially, all the cottages must meet all the requirements of Ontario building codes. So do all other new structures, but older structures may suffer from various defects, problems, deficiencies given time period in which they were constructed, and not largely fall beyond the scope of the municipal inspectors unless modifications are made. Structural movement. Many recreation properties have been built on perimeter walls and are not full foundations. As a result, some structure may have cracks in walls or other visual signs of building movement and settling, such as uneven floors. Often, seasonal cottages are built using a concrete block, and telltale crack appears in the foundation walls footings. The problem may involve in an inadequate fitting, which can be expensive to repair. Older cottages are particularly prone to this problem as footings may have been installed on a weak soil over of insufficient depth, size and depth to support the structural weight. Also, the footings may not have extended below the frost line, resulting in frost heaving for following the winter months and the spring thaw. Um, piers, cottage constructed using piers, uh, may have issues because piers use may not be adequate. There could be deterioration in the wood, or the span between the piers is too large. One sign, once again, signs of movement include structural cracks, sagging, and piers that are out of alignment. Problems may also be due to the inadequate footings below the piers. Roof construction or pitch. Older cottages may suffer from inadequate roof construction, such as insufficient roof trusses, large spacing between trusses, or generally poor construction quality resulting in sagging. Further, cottage roofs may have been built or extended with low pitch, resulting in deterioration as a result of heavy snow load, or ice damming. Decks and porches. Efficiency in the main structure also found with decks and porches given inappropriate constructed footings and piers. In some instances, cottage owners may have improved the structure for a living from a living perspective, or expanded the area without taking into consideration the added load and the needed structural modification. Drainage. Many older cottages are built on low lands near the water edge with poor drainage. Often the original owner was not overly concerned as no basement was ever contemplated and the entire structure was built on a concrete block piling or a perimeter wall with a crawl space. However, the lack of drainage can result not only in the long term moisture damage to the structure, but also erosion near or under the structure and damage due to spring runoff from high elevations surrounding the building area. Improper drainage can also pose a health hazard should surface water enter a well that is located in a low wet area. Further, poor drainage surrounding absorption bed of a sewage for a sewage system located in a similar area may create significant problems. And also their do-it-yourself work. Prospective buyers may should be particularly cautious about investigating any cottage regarding structural or other changes. Often, weekend owners spend their time altering or adding to the existing structure, so existing cottage. Appropriate approval may not have been obtained, and workmanship may be substandard, and improper material may have been used. Wood stove, wood burning appliances in existing cottage may not have been installed. According to the Ontario Building Code, Ontario Fire Code, prospective buyer are advised to have these appliances inspected by a certified member of a Wood Energy Technology Transfer, which is a non-profit training and educational association that promotes safe and effective use of wood burning systems in Canada. Winterization. No clear definition exists for term winterization, and yet it's commonly used in reference to cottages that are converted from seasonal to a year-round use. Unfortunately, the fully winterized cottages is related to the person making the statement. For example, one person may be speaking of a cottage that is occupied year-round, while other may be referred to one that is occupied during specific weeks in winters and otherwise left unheated during the balance of the season. There is no clearly universally accepted standard, but cottage buyers have should be careful. Consider the following: there could be varying amount of insulation, and the cottage windows may be winterized without. Cottage owner may have winterized without replacing windows. Often, original windows were the slider windows with limited insulation value and prone to leakage. A new owner would undoubtedly face a costly replacement program involving casement windows with double or triple glazing. Often, extensive use of glass, or for example, a solarium, may forewarn of a potential heating and ventilation problems unless proper construction methods and materials were used. The same as apply to skylights that are prone to leakages unless professionally installed. Unheated areas or cold areas. Floors above certain floors over certain unheated areas, such as crawl space, may not be insulated. Keep in mind that corrective action would require adequate space to install insulation, improve ventilation, and install heating ducts. Proper ventilation and vapor barriers are typically needed to reduce the potential for damage due to moisture buildup. As, as a further caution, the owner may have added insulation but not installed proper vapor barriers, giving The difficulty of doing so in a retrofit basis, water septic system. Even though owners may use a cottage in the winter, it still begs of question as to what extent of water or waste disposal winterization has occurred. If the cottage is an unheated structure during most of the winter, water lines must be carefully drained to avoid freezing and antifreeze placed in traps, leading to the sewage system. Also, there are pumps located. Also, where are the pumps located and what procedure must be followed for those during winter months. Vaulted ceiling, the structural design of uninsulated vaulted ceilings may prevent the cost-effective installation of proper insulation. A significant retrofit project may be the only one to resolve this problem. Retaining wall. Retaining walls are often used for shore areas, landscaping, and driveways due to challenging terrain. The difficulty for buyers lies in assessing the quality of construction because the important component are buried in the wall itself. Well constructed uh, retaining walls must have adequate drainage, proper gravel behind the wall at the outlet at the base, adequate fitting, and quality materials. To recap, there are few issues that needs to be taken care of. Looking at the construction side of it, there could be structural movements because of the perimeter wall, not a full foundation. The footing could be inadequate. The piers might be damaged or not adequate. The roof construction or a pitch might have issues. For example, a low pitch can result in ice damming. Deck and porches are not per standard. Drainage might not be adequate, um, and also like do-it-yourself work might be substandard. Wood stoves might not meet the current uh, regulations for Ontario Building Code and Ontario Fire Code, and so the recommendation is to use to get it inspected by certified member of VET. Winterization again can be a challenge because there can be varying amount of insulation. Windows might not be properly insulated. There could be unheated areas or cold areas, and uh, and also like the water or septic system might not be up to date. And vaulted ceiling would also make cost-effective installation of proper insulation as a challenge. Retaining walls are also have a challenge because it's difficult for the buyer to know what is whether it's whether it's properly constructed or not. So so it is required that while drafting clause, the buyer puts a condition regarding inspection. Essentially, a buyer is submitting an offer and wants an inspection completed by a specific individual who is a who is a builder in the area and is very familiar with the cottage properties. Now coming on to the next important topic is the water well and waste disposal system. Water quality, the quality of the the water quality and quantity primarily falls under two statutes, which one is Ontario Water Resource Act and the second is Safe Drinking Water Act. Um, Real estate resident most commonly encounter water quality issues relating to private well system in rural and cottage areas. Matter involving the private matter involving a private system for use by residential household, including a cottage, falls under the Ontario Water Resource Act. Ministry of Environment license is well contracted under Ontario Water Resource Act, and all the work must meet minimum well construction requirements. Once constructed, the well owner is responsible for monitoring, maintaining, and preventing contamination of well, including an aquifer. An aquifer refers to any water-bearing formation that is capable of transporting water in a sufficient quantity to serve as a source of water supply. Well records are maintained by the Ministry of Environment. Water sources. Cottage rely on various water sources. Newer cottage wells are typically either drilled or bored. Dug wells may also be found in older cottages. Drilled wells normally involve a smaller diameter pipe, while the bored wells can be 2 or 3 feet in diameter and considerably more shallow than the drill well. Registered may also encounter shared system in which a well is located on one cottage property but shared with others nearby. A buyer facing this situation should have a clear understanding of the sharing arrangement and associated rights, responsibilities, and maintenance cost. Cottage may also rely on a shore well that is located near the water edge. Such wells are particularly prone to contamination. Alternatively, water or lake water may be pumped through an open ground or above or below ground pipe from the shore to the building. Obviously, the risk of contamination is much higher, and water purification equipment is typically installed. Alternatively, some cottage owners may rely on well for drinking water and restrict lake water use for other daily needs. For the contamination testing, the water well contamination are generally due to two factors: poor construction and the surface water contamination often rises from the drainage problem. As a consequence, continuous bacteriological testing of private well system is strongly recommended. Such testing is typically done by local health authorities, but private labs also provide this service. Three separate samples are recommended and should be collected 1 to 3 weeks apart. Following initial testing, one or two tests per year appear adequate unless some occurrence has taken place and that could affect the water quality. For seasonal properties, 2 or 3 samples are recommended during any particular season, with the first being conducted at the start of the season. Preventive measures. Various measures should be taken by cottages to ensure high water quality and prevent contamination from leakage into the well. Seal from the outside any opening to the well using durable sealing material. Ensure that sanitary well seal and well caps are firmly fitted and watertight. Make certain that vent pipes are properly screened or otherwise protected so that the foreign matter does not enter the well. The well casing should be visible to ensure easy access if repair work is required. If the existing well is below ground level, it is advisable to have a casing raised to a minimum of 40 centimeters above the ground level. Well disinfecting. Water disinfecting can be accompanied by using chlorine. Chlorine is a greenish yellow incombustible water soluble poisonous gas. Chlorination is used with the new or reworked well, cistern, spring, pumps, and pipes. Disinfecting water by chlorination ex- extends to electrical cable ropes, pipes, well caps, and plumbing lines and fixtures in the house presently drawing water from the well. Bacteria may get into the water supply during construction or repair. Disinfecting is the final step after all defects in the location and construction has been corrected and before samples are collected for bacterial examination. Typically, a predetermined amount of chlorinated household bleach is poured into the well based on the water depth. Then all taps are opened until the chlorine odor is detected. Water in the pipes is then left to stand for a minimum of 6 hours and consequently flushed. It is recommended that residents store enough clean water for 3 days for drinking, washing, and watering plants before well disinfecting. Another option is to boil all water used from the source. A bacteriological retesting of water follows several days. Meanwhile, all water used from the source should be boiled. Cottage may elect to pour bleach into the existing well, given that a bacteriological test has indicated contamination. While this immediate chlorine infusion will undoubtedly produce safe water test, the underlying problem, such as groundwater seepage, still remains. The chlorine has temporarily removed the bacteria, but the bacteria will most likely return. Private well treatment. Two of the several water treatment systems for private well are included. For example, there is a chlorine injection unit, and the second one is the reverse osmosis. The chlorine injection unit has a water merge pump into a pressure or a storage tank that is large enough to ensure that the water will be stored for a specified period of time to effectively destroy any bacteria. Any alternate treatment device called as superchlorination unit is installed either before or immediately after the pump. As the water pump is activated, the unit feeds a strong chlorine or solution chlorine into the water. The water is then passed through a activated carbon fiber to dechlorinate the treated water. Reverse osmosis involves removal of dissolved solids and minerals from the water supply that is frequently used in the irrigation property. Reverse osmosis entails forcing water through a semi-permeable membrane. The membrane passes fresh water, leaving behind minerals and other solid content Such units have a limited gallonage per day capacity. Sewage septic system. A sewage system may be outdated or inadequate to handle current demands or otherwise not operating properly. New septic tank installation falls under the Ontario Building Code. An approval certificate is required. And as appropriate permit issued before the system can be operated. Buyers must be aware that the cottages are frequently built for seasonal residences, but then are expanded and modernized. For example, a septic tank system might have been originally built for one bath and two bathrooms, but a much larger winterized home now my boasts of three bedrooms, three baths, and a cottage and a guest cottage are aligned on the oil system. This this would put the system into stress. Most septic systems involve absorption bed or the leaching bed. Specific raised absorption bed. A raised absorption bed is constructed on or above the existing terrain as a part of the sewage system being approved. Imported soil and our special filters given special absorption qualities of the approved filter sand, the overall leaching bed size is reduced in comparison to conventional leaching bed used in a sewage system. Clearance from the adjacent well or structures are increased by an amount equal to 2 units horizontal for each unit vertical height of the surface of the leaching bed above the natural grade. For example, if the clearance of the well of 15 meters for a standard leaching bed, a raised absorption bed might require a minimum clearance of 30 meters or more. These absorption beds are frequently encountered when there is a lack of soil depth to accommodate the standard leaching system, such as in a rocky terrain, typical of in many northern irrigation areas. Raised absorption bed have a life expectancy of 25 to 35 years, as in the case with standard leaching bed. However, this can vary depending on the circumstances. Details are provided for education purposes only. We should contact the building department of local municipality for guidance. So, in addition, to to recap, from water well construction and water disposal system has the issue of water quality because of the water sources, and having contamination because of poor construction or surface water can also cause the contamination. Preventive measures involve using chlorination. Essentially, there can be a chlorination injection unit or a reverse osmosis. Regarding sewage or septic system, the problems could be because of outdated sewage or inadequate capacity to handle the current demand. And new septic tank installation requires an Ontario Building Code approval certification. Raised absorption bed needed because of can be needed because of the rocky location, inadequate drainage, or poor percolation. So to prevent the bad, there's a need for a condition regarding the sewage system or and a good working order warranty that a buyer can put in. The next topic is the waterfront improvement. Waterfront cottage owners may have constructed a boathouse, docks, or the improvements on the bed of the lake or a river that is not owned. Uh, an overview of relevant legislation is necessary to fully understand the issue. Let's look at the Public Lands Act. Lands Act Public Lands Act pursuant to the Public Lands Act. Lands, Public lands pursuant to the Public Lands Act are administered by Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and involve the management and disposition of public land and forest. The Act and the regulations set out requirements for issuance of work permit regarding the public land, the sale or lease of such lands, roads on public land, alteration affecting these lands, and construction of dams and other water-related improvements. Real estate registrants most frequently encounter public lands and the Ministry of Natural Resource and Forestry in the relation to work permits and shoreline ownership issues. The Act provides that no person shall, without a permit, carry on logging, mineral exploration, or industrial exploration on public land, construct or place a building, structure, or things, or on public land, clear or cause to clear any public land, dredge or cause to dredge any shoreline, or fill or cause to fill any shoreline for the purpose of the Act refer to the public lands, public or private lands occurred covered by the water of the lake, river, stream, or pond, and include adjacent land that are seasonally inundated by water. So essentially, to recap, the public land sets out the requirement for issuance of work permit regarding public lands and sale or lease of such lands, road and alterations or construction of dam, shoreline ownership issues, and the work permit are something that I still need to be aware of. Shoreline is nothing but a public or private land covered by water of lakes, rivers, stream, and including adjacent land, and waterfront properties, boathouses, and so it's important to note that waterfront properties can be both federally and can have jurisdiction by both federal and the provincial. For federal is like Radio Tarrant, Severin, or Department of Canada Heritage, Park Canada, and provincial jurisdiction would involve setbacks, floodplains, and other restrictions by the Conservation Authority. The next topic for waterfront improvements is the boathouses on docks. The construction of boathouses or docks can impact both shoreline water and fish habitat. Permits for construction of these structures may fall to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, as such structures are normally built on public land as defined under the Public Lands Act, the land that falls below the high water mark for most water bodies in Ontario. As mentioned above, if the property fronts on Rideau or Tarrant 7th waterway, in water or shoreline work must be approved by the federal authorities. Currently, the appropriate federal contact is the Department of Canadian Heritage, Park Canada, along with appropriate approval by relevant municipalities. Work permit. The requirement of a work permit from Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry will depend on the type of work being completed. Buyers and sellers should be contact the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry for guidance and specific regarding permits. For docks and boathouses, do not normally need a work permit if the cantilever docks, if the footings are located off the shoreland. Floating docks or floating boathouses, docks or boathouses supported by posts, stilt poles, cribs, or other supporting structure, provided that the area of the supporting structure on the bed of the lake does not exceed 15 square meters. Boat lifts in marine railways, where the current occupied area on the bed of the water body is less than 15 meters, or removal of an old decker or boathouse. But boathouse or docks do require work permit if any of the boathouses where the total area of the crib is greater than the 15 square meters. The next item is along the lines of two-storied or single-story boathouses with living accommodation. For two-storied or single-story boathouses with living accommodation, the Land Use Occupation Authority is required under the Public Lands Act. Property owners considering boathouses or docks should contact the ministry for detailed information. Individual contemplating such project are also reminded that the Federal Fisheries Act provides for the protection of fish habitat. Violation can involve substantial fines. Ministry of MNR provides a set of guidelines to assist to better ensure that boathouses or docks minimize environmental harm. Dredging and related activities. Dredging is broadly classified as any activity that involves removal or displacement of materials from the lake, river, or stream bed. The bed of the most bodies of water are legal public lands and fall under the Public Lands Act. So the permit is not required for the installation of cable, water line, or a heat loop for the private for the for private use like single cottage or residence. Submarine cables, when laid on the lake or the river bottom, they also do not require a permit, but permit is required when for boat channels or for the boat channels or swimming lanes, installation of a cable, water line or heat loop for commercial purposes, removal of dock boulders from for shoreline or bottom of the lakes to fill the crib or create a beach. Individual contemplating dredging should also be reminded that the Federal Fisheries Act provides the protection of fish habitat. Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry provide a range of guidelines to assist in this regard and better to ensure that the dredging project minimizes harm to fish habitat. So basically, to kind of summarize, a work permit is required to fill shorelines, such as creating a beach or constructing a shoreline protection, dredge shorelines, such as creating a boat slip, installing a water line, a heat loop for commercial purposes, or removal of a rock or boulder from the shore, constructing a dock or a boathouse where total area of the surface exceeds 15 square meters, constructing a building on public land, construct a road on public lands, except when constructed under the authority of the Crown Forest Sustainability Act, construct a trail on the public land, except constructed under the authority of the Crown Forest Sustainability Act, or construct a water crossing on the public land, except under the authority of the Forestry Crown Forest Sustainability Act. Aquatic plant control. Aquatic plant control. Waterfront cottage owners have used various control methods for aquatic plants that include raking, mechanical harvesting, removal by hand, placement of barriers, cutter bars, and devices that mow the plant, and the use of chemicals or herbicides. The underlying regulatory concern is that such practices will in some way harm fish habitat. Procedures are established based on the type of control being used, chemical or physical or mechanical. Chemical. The Ministry of Environment oversees the control of underwater plant growth through the use of chemicals like herbicides pursuant to the Pesticide Act, and a permit must be obtained from the ministry. Properties fronting the Radio Canal or Tarrant 7 waterway fall under the federal jurisdiction, and Park Canada, Department of Canadian Heritage, should also be contacted. Removal of aquatic plants is seasonally restricted owing to fish spawning period, and exact time frames will be set out in the permit. Approvals do not in any way relieve the responsibility of the person using such chemicals from recourse by others, neighbors for undesirable effect. Clearly, expert advice is required while considering the use of chemicals. Physical or mechanical, the requirement for a work permit from a Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry involving a physical or mechanical means will depend on the location of the property and the size of the project. A permit is not required for the removal of 200 square meters of aquatic vegetation. but anything above 100 would require a permit. Access and road allowance. Access is a key issue when a potential buyer is considering the purchase of a property. He or she should determine that the property can be accessed by public roads or private road. If the road is private, who owns the road and what costs are involved, and is there a registered or permanent right to access the property using that road? If the road is public, is it open year round, and what services and maintenance are provided? If the cottage is on an island, the potential buyer should also determine where a car can be parked or and a boat docked. Road allowance. Certain basic fact about legal costs by public roads should be is to be outlined. Unless a public road allowance set forth by the Crown Surveyor has been closed by municipal decree, it remains open, despite the fact that it has never been used. Interestingly, this rule also applies to roads that are dedicated and accepted within a plan of subdivision. As a result, as a point of clarification, subdivision developers will dedicate certain part of the draft plan of subdivision as a public roads. However, these do not technically become public until the time the municipality accepts such dedications in accordance with the provisions set out in the Planning Act and agrees to maintain these roads. As a further point of interest, a road may become a part of the municipal road system if the municipal money is regularly spent on that road for repair and maintenance. Also, a property owner may wish to open an unopened road allowance at private expense. Municipal approval is required, and the owner must bring the road up to the exterior standards and provide financial assurances that such costs will be paid should the municipality do the work. Shore road allowance. The initial laying of out of road allowance in Ontario includes establishment of a shore road allowance, which is 66 feet in width from the high water mark of a navigable river or shores of lake. Such roads are rarely opened, but intended for commercial pursuit and public passage. The fact that these have never been opened does not affect their legal status and or the right of the public to use them. Townships survey prior to 1850 do not contain these road allowances. The existence of road allowances will normally appear in the deed to the property. Shore road allowances are discussed in more details later. Buyers should be aware that structures on a waterfront lot are built on road allowance. In fact, the actual cottage may encroach a part of the shore allowance. Clearly, the only way to accurately determine such matters is to obtain legal expertise and ensure that the survey is prepared by the Ontario Land Surveyor, setting out the location of all structures on the lot. Private road right of way. The resident should proceed with caution regarding any property that is accessed by a private road right of way. Such right of way may be deeded or undeeded. Even in the case of deed right of way, the registered description may be vague or the paper trade from one owner to the other may not have been completed properly, and the legal status of right of way could be called into question. Zoning requirements. Zoning bylaws are intended to implement the overall policies as set out in the official plan. The common provisions in applying to all. So the cottages and more specifically waterfront homes, the cottages come under the close scrutiny as they're located on lands which are in close vicinity of natural features and environment sensitive areas that the municipality wants to protect. Therefore, added restrictions are often imposed on cottage regarding land use, erection or location of buildings, structures, required frontage and depth, setbacks, lot coverage, and type of construction. The planning and provides clear direction to municipalities concerning the protection of environment sensitive areas. The municipality can create zoning provisions related to marshy land for prohibiting the erection of any class of buildings or structures on land that is subject to flooding or on land with steep slopes that is rocky, low-lying, marshy, unstable, hazardous, subject to erosion or to the natural or artificial perils. Contaminated land, sensitive or vulnerable areas. Natural features or and areas. Planning allows for municipalities to create zoning restrictions to the marshy lands. Contaminated lands are sensitive or vulnerable areas. Natural features and areas. Cottage zoning involves setback from the high water mark. No structure within 20 meters from the high water mark. Municipalities may use high water mark to determine the setbacks and other related rules, notwithstanding legal debates as to the to establishment of high water mark on inland lake or a river. There might be boat houses or boat ports or deck, so for, which might have additional requirements. Non-conforming uses. Municipalities are are introducing new, more restrictive zoning provisions in the interest of improved environmental protection and power planning. However, most southern Ontario lakefront developments were established many decades ago. Consequently, recreational zoning bylaws typically contain lists of non-conforming lots, given that they existed prior to the effective date of the present bylaws. Such lots may have been used and buildings erected and large modified or repaired, provided they comply with all the other provisions of the zoning bylaw. Environmental zones and floodplain can cause additional requirements. Services. Cottage owners face other challenges given that their properties are somewhat in distant locations in recreation areas. The following information is provided to assist the resident in understanding limitations. Hydro One and telephone services. As a general guideline, Hydro One network will provide 30 meters of free wire from the last pole location, which is the primary line, on dedicated accepted road allowance. The company should be contacted directly involving situations where primary line is at a distance and must be brought some distance to the owner property. For example, a group of currently unserviced cottages may be located on a private access road that is 500 meters from the dedicated road allowance where the primary line is located. Cottage should also be aware that the services may not be available given that the installation of primary secondary lines are not economically feasible. In the case of telephone service, Bell Canada will extend an existing service to the new customers, but as with Hydro One, provision of services that exceed the specified distance must be borne by the customer. Interestingly, the fact that Hydro has already provided the services to a cottage or cottages that are automatically assure that the provisions of telephone services. Telephone company will undertake an independent analysis of demand and economic viability for installing telephone facilities in a certain areas. Bell Canada normally uses Hydro One poles to sting telephone lines. Municipal services like garbage collection. Bashers should ascertain from the municipality whether or not garbage services are provided. Typically, the municipalities provide such services on a dedicated roads, but either limits or offers no service in case of more distant recreational areas. In such instances, the property owner may have to take garbage to a landfill site or to the bins provided by the municipality at certain points within its geographical boundary. Cottages on the private access roads typically must be for private service or deliver their garbage to a landfill site. Fire protection. Cottages within reasonable distance from of larger communities are normally serviced by a staffed fire department. However, small rural communities and surrounding areas may rely on volunteers. Even more remote areas will have no service. Listeners are reminded that proximity to fire hall can impact the rate charged for fire insurance. Typically, insurance companies focus on whether the structure is within 5 miles of corresponding fire hall. In certain locales, insurers may not provide coverage given the lack of adequate fire protection. School buses. Typical school buses route are restricted to main public roads. The buyer should contact the applicable Board of Education directly to determine availability. When contacting the board, be prepared to provide the legal description, municipal address, and the current owner's name. Potential buyers should also be aware that the areas consisting of primary seasonal users may not be serviced by school buses. Policies on this matter vary in recreational areas across the province. So, just to recap, cottages are broadly grouped into seasonal or year-round use. Cottage must meet requirements of Ontario Building Code. but many other older structures may suffer from various defect problems and deficiencies. Structural movement is a key consideration, as many cottages may have been built at perimeter walls or piers that may not meet the current standards. No clear definition for winterization exists. Buyers must be careful to fully understand the extent of winterization and the challenges in correcting potential problems. An appropriate conditional clause should be inserted in the agreement of purchase and sale to permit the buyers to adequate time to have professionally to have a property professionally inspected. Water quality and quantity are primarily consideration of for cottage buyers. Draft and appropriate condition that addresses both mechanical system and ability to have bacteriological analysis. A raised observation bed may be required given terrain or soil conditions. As with water wells, an appropriate condition should be included relating to the sewage system, including the seller's warranty regarding its in good working order. The requirement of a boathouse for a boathouse or a dock permit will depend on circumstances surrounding the scope of the project. A potential cottage buyer should firmly establish what access is provided to the cottage. Be particularly cautious with undeeded right of way, while also noting that deeded right of way are not without problems. Waterfront cottages come under tighter scrutiny concerning zoning restrictions given their proximity to environmentally sensitive areas. Cottage buyers should be aware that additional costs may be incurred to obtain hydro or telephone services. I think we are done for Chapter 4 cottage properties. Thanks.